Imagine moving into a new apartment, only to discover your roommate never existed. What would you do if every night at 2:47 a.m., someone you thought was your friend came knocking at your door, asking to be let in? Tonight, we bring you the chilling, true-to-life horror story of the vanishing roommate. If you enjoyed this story and want more real-life horror tales, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us keep bringing you terrifying stories every week. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an upload, and thank you for being part of our growing horror community. The arrival. Sara gripped the handle of her suitcase with one hand and shielded her eyes from the late afternoon sun with the other. The taxi had already driven off, leaving her in front of the 3-story brick apartment building that would be her home for the next year. The structure loomed quietly on the corner of the street, its faded red bricks stained darker at the edges, as though the rain had been trying for decades to wash the place away. It wasn't a terrible neighborhood, not by any means. Students bustled on the sidewalks, laughing, carrying textbooks and groceries. A couple of bicycles leaned against the railing of the apartment stairs, their chains oiled, their owners likely young and busy. The windows on the top floor reflected the sun in dull yellow streaks, and one shutter banged lightly in the wind, tapping a rhythm that was slightly offbeat, as though it were out of sync with the world. Sara told herself it was fine. She was tired from the move and stressed about starting her new semester. "It's just an old building," she whispered under her breath, forcing a smile. "Perfectly fine." Dragging her suitcase up the steps, she reached the entrance door and wrestled with the lock. The landlord had given her a heavy brass key with a little tag labeled Unit 2B. The key turned stiffly, protesting as if it hadn't been used in years. When the door finally creaked open, a wave of cool, musty air drifted out. It smelled faintly of old wood, dust, and something she couldn't quite place, something metallic, like iron. Inside, the hallway stretched dimly lit, with yellow bulbs humming faintly in frosted glass fixtures. The carpet was worn, patterned with swirls that had long ago faded into indiscernible shapes. The sound of her suitcase wheels echoed unnaturally loud, and she felt for just a moment as if her arrival had stirred the building awake. She reached Unit 2B and knocked out of habit, though she was sure the landlord had said her roommate was already inside. The door opened almost instantly. A young woman stood there, smiling brightly, her long chestnut hair falling over one shoulder. "You must be Sara. I'm Claire." Sara let out a relieved breath. Claire's warmth immediately pushed away the chill of the hallway. She wore a simple, oversized sweater and leggings, her feet tucked into fuzzy socks. The apartment behind her smelled faintly of chamomile tea and vanilla candles, a comforting contrast to the musty corridors outside. "Hi, yeah, I'm Sara. Nice to meet you," she said, dragging her suitcase inside. The apartment was modest but charming. A small living room with a sagging beige couch and a low coffee table greeted her. A bookshelf in the corner held a mix of novels and potted plants, their leaves healthy and glossy. The kitchen was visible through a narrow archway, its counters tidy, a kettle steaming gently on the stove. "I made tea," Claire said cheerfully, closing the door behind them. "Figured you might be tired after the move." Sara smiled gratefully. "You read my mind." They settled in the kitchen, mugs of steaming chamomile cradled in their hands. Claire spoke easily, her voice carrying the lilting rhythm of someone comfortable with new people. She was an art history major, originally from Vermont. She laughed often, her eyes crinkling at the corners, and Sara found herself relaxing more with each passing moment. The anxiety that had gripped her earlier, the unease about the building, the strange smell in the hallway, faded into the background. By the time they finished their tea, Claire was already showing Sara her bedroom. A cozy space with a bed tucked under the window, a small desk in the corner, and a dresser that looked older than the building itself. "It's not much, but it's yours," Claire said with a grin. Sara dropped her suitcase on the floor and sat on the bed, which creaked but held. It's perfect. Thank you. That night, after unpacking a few essentials and showering in the cramped but clean bathroom, Sarah fell asleep easily, lulled by the quiet hum of the old pipes. But around 3 a.m. she woke. The apartment was silent except for the faint sound of dripping water somewhere, perhaps a leaky faucet. She sat up, listening. There it was again, not dripping. Footsteps. Soft, measured, moving down the hallway just outside her room. Sarah held her breath, straining her ears. The steps stopped. A moment later, a door clicked shut. Maybe Claire's? She exhaled slowly, heart thudding. Of course. Claire had probably just gone to the kitchen for water. Nothing strange about that. Still, when she finally lay back down, it took her a long time to fall asleep. The silence. The first 2 weeks in the apartment passed with a strange rhythm, one that Sarah couldn't quite settle into. At first, she tried to ignore it. The building creaked, pipes groaned, and the old carpet muffled footsteps in strange ways. But slowly, she began to notice patterns, familiar things that didn't add up. The biggest of them was Claire. Her roommate was odd. Not unfriendly, never hostile. In fact, Claire was warm, cheerful even, always ready to share a cup of tea or a funny story. She talked about her classes, about art, about places she wanted to travel. But Sarah began to notice that conversations rarely went deeper than that. Claire had no family photos, no old yearbooks, not even scraps of paper or clutter that might reveal pieces of her past. Her room, when Sarah had glimpsed it the first night, had been tidy. Too tidy. Still, it wasn't until one quiet Tuesday evening that the unease began to really take hold. Sarah had come home late from the library, her backpack digging painfully into her shoulder. The apartment was dark except for the dim light under Claire's door. Sarah dropped her bag on the couch and tapped lightly on the wood. "Hey, Claire, you still up?" No response. The door creaked slightly as she pushed it open. "Sorry, just wanted to borrow a—" Her words died. The room was empty. The bed was neatly made, pillows perfectly arranged. The desk held nothing but a lamp and a blank sheet of paper. The closet doors stood wide open, revealing only empty hangers swaying slightly as if they had been touched moments ago. Sarah blinked, stepping further in. This didn't make sense. Claire's things had been here before: sketchbooks, clothes, a mug on the nightstand. Now there was nothing. It looked less like someone had moved out and more like no one had ever lived there at all. Her chest tightened. She closed the door quickly and backed into the hallway, her mind racing. She hadn't heard anyone come or go. Claire had been there this morning eating cereal at the table. She had even laughed about the milk going sour. Sarah's first thought was that maybe Claire was playing some weird joke. Maybe she was one of those people who got a thrill out of messing with roommates. But the silence pressed against her like a weight. She went to her own room, shut the door, and tried to convince herself she was imagining things. The next day, she asked the landlord casually if he had seen Claire. He was an older man with thinning hair and a thick accent. Sarah frowned. "What do you mean?" "My roommate, Claire. She signed the lease with me." The landlord shook his head, flipping through a clipboard of papers. "No, this unit rented only to you. One person, you. Always just you." Her mouth went dry. "That's not possible. I've been living with her for weeks." He looked at her like she was confused. Or lying. With a shrug, he muttered something under his breath and walked away. Sarah stood frozen in the lobby, her heart pounding. "Always just you." The words echoed in her mind as she climbed the stairs, each step heavier than the last. When she reached the apartment, she hesitated outside the door. What if he was right? What if she opened it and Claire wasn't there at all? What if she had imagined everything? The tea, the laughter, the sketches, the movies. Her hand trembled as she slid the key into the lock. The door opened. Inside, the apartment looked the same. Her books still on the shelf, her groceries in the kitchen. But Claire's door was ajar again. Sara forced herself to peek inside. Empty. Still empty. The air felt colder in there, though she couldn't say why. She backed out, shutting the door as quietly as possible, as though afraid to disturb something. That night, the silence was unbearable. Sara lay in bed staring at the ceiling, every sound magnified. The hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock, the faint rustle of curtains in the draft. She thought of the landlord's words, of the hollow emptiness of Claire's room, and of the way her laugh had sounded so real, so warm. She turned over, burying her face in the pillow. Maybe she was losing it. Maybe the stress of the semester, the move, and the loneliness was twisting her mind into hearing and seeing what wasn't there. She tried to convince herself of that, but at exactly 2:47 a.m. there came a sound. A knock, soft, deliberate, on her bedroom door. The knock came again. Sara sat bolt upright in bed, heart slamming against her ribs. It was soft, almost polite, but undeniably real. She clutched her blanket to her chest and strained her ears. Silence. The seconds dragged, heavy and suffocating. She told herself it could have been the pipes. These old buildings made noises all the time. But pipes didn't knock. Slowly, she swung her legs out of bed. The wooden floor chilled her feet, and she winced at the groan of the boards. She crept closer to the door, each step deliberate, her breath shallow. Her hand hovered over the knob. "Don't open it." Something inside her whispered. She pressed her ear against the cool wood. Nothing. No footsteps, no shuffling, no whisper of breath on the other side. Just silence. She forced a laugh under her breath. "You're losing it, Sara." Still, she locked the door before crawling back under the covers. Sleep didn't come easily. The next morning, she tried to pretend everything was fine. She made coffee, scrolled half-heartedly through her phone, and set up her laptop for class notes. The routine should have grounded her. Instead, she felt untethered, drifting through the day as though she were half awake. When she opened the fridge, she froze. The milk carton was gone. She distinctly remembered buying a fresh one 2 days ago. "Claire," she called out instinctively, then bit her lip. The silence that followed was suffocating. She slammed the fridge shut harder than necessary and pressed her palms against the counter. Her reflection in the microwave caught her eye. She looked pale, her dark circles deeper than usual. "You're not crazy," she told herself. "Someone was here. Someone is here." Later that afternoon, she tried calling her best friend from back home, Mia. She needed to hear a familiar voice, someone to anchor her. Mia picked up on the second ring. "Hey, stranger. Settling into the new place?" Sara hesitated, then forced a laugh. "Yeah, it's fine. The apartment's old, though. Creaky." Mia chuckled. Classic college housing. "At least you've got a roommate, right? Makes it less creepy." The words lodged in Sara's throat. She stared at the closed door across the hall, her pulse quickening. "Yeah," she lied softly. "A roommate helps." Mia rambled on about her own classes, her professor's weird obsession with outdated textbooks, the bar she and their friends had gone to last weekend. Sara tried to follow, but her gaze kept drifting to Claire's door. When the call ended, she stood there for a long moment, staring at that door. Finally, she took a breath, marched over, and turned the knob. The room was the same as before, empty, sterile, no clothes, no books, no signs of life. But on the desk, there was something new, a sketchbook. She hadn't noticed it before. Had it been there all along? Her hand shook as she flipped it open. The pages were filled with pencil drawings, faces. Dozens of them, some incomplete, some eerily detailed. Every single one had wide, hollow eyes that seemed to follow her. Her stomach turned as she flipped through faster. Page after page of those empty stares, until finally she reached the last one. It was a drawing of her. Sara dropped the sketchbook, stumbling back. Her likeness stared up at her from the page, the eyes shaded so dark they looked like empty sockets. She slammed the door shut and fled to her room, locking it behind her. That night she couldn't sleep at all. Every shadow stretched too long, every sound felt unnatural. She lay rigid, listening. At 2:47 a.m., the knock came again. This time, it was louder. She clutched her pillow, every muscle tense. The knock repeated, steady, insistent. Then a voice, soft, female, familiar. "Sara, let me in." Her blood ran cold. It was Claire's voice, but Claire didn't exist. The knock. The voice lingered outside her door like smoke, seeping into every corner of the room. "Sara," it whispered again. Softer this time, almost pleading. She pressed both hands over her ears, squeezing her eyes shut. It wasn't real. Couldn't be real. Claire wasn't there. She couldn't be there. The landlord had said so. The empty room had proved it. And yet, she had seen the sketchbook. Her stomach churned as her thoughts tangled into knots. She wanted to scream, to tell the voice to go away, but the words stuck in her throat. All she could do was sit frozen, staring at the trembling doorknob. A minute passed. Then 2. The knocking stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse, heavy and expectant, as though the apartment itself was holding its breath. Finally, she dared to move. Crawling across the floor, she pressed her ear against the door. Nothing. Only silence. Her hand hovered over the lock. She almost turned it, just to prove to herself that no one was there. But then, faintly, she heard it. Breathing. On the other side of the door, someone was breathing. Slow, deliberate, too steady to be her imagination. She jerked away, heart hammering. The breath continued for a moment, then faded. She sat in the corner of her room, knees pulled to her chest, and waited for dawn. When morning came, the light did nothing to settle her nerves. Shadows clung to the corners of the apartment, and every sound set her teeth on edge. She forced herself into a routine. Shower, coffee, check emails. The normalcy was a flimsy shield, but it was all she had. Still, the silence pressed in. Without Claire's cheerful chatter, without music or television, the apartment felt like a tomb. Sara decided she needed proof. If she could just capture something, anything, on her phone, maybe she could show someone, maybe Mia or the landlord. Maybe then she'd know she wasn't losing her mind. That night, she set her phone on the dresser, camera aimed at the door, recording. She climbed into bed fully dressed, clutching her blanket like armor, and waited. Hours crawled by. The city outside went quiet, and the apartment sank into its midnight stillness. 2:40 a.m. Her eyelids grew heavy. 2:46 a.m. She forced herself awake, pulse thudding in her throat. 2:47 a.m. The knock. Soft, deliberate. She sat rigid, staring at the door. Her phone's screen glowed faintly, capturing everything. The knock came again, louder this time, insistent. And then the voice. "Sara, open the door." Her hands shook violently. She wanted to scream, to tell it to stop, but fear sealed her lips. She reached for her phone, fumbling to pause the recording, desperate to see what she had caught. The screen froze. No sound. No video. Just static. Her stomach dropped. The knocking continued, harder now, rattling the door in its frame. The voice rose, sharper, almost angry. "Let me in!" Sara scrambled backward, pressing herself against the wall. Tears stung her eyes. "Go away," she choked out. "You're not real." The knocking stopped. Silence. Her chest heaved as she listened, waiting. For a moment, she thought it was over. Then slowly, the doorknob turned. The doorknob twisted again, harder this time, metal scraping against the lock. Sara's breath caught in her throat. She stared, wide-eyed, frozen, as though her body no longer obeyed her. Click. The lock held. But the knob jerked violently, rattling back and forth as if someone on the other side was furious, determined to break through. Sara pressed her palms to her ears, rocking back and forth. "Stop," she whispered. "Please stop." The rattling stopped. For one long, unbearable moment, the silence was complete. Sara dared to hope it was over, until she heard it again, breathing, slow, steady, deep, just inches away, seeping through the cracks of the door. Her phone buzzed suddenly on the dresser, a new notification. The sound shattered the silence like glass. She scrambled for it, clutching it to her chest like a lifeline. But when she unlocked the screen, her stomach dropped. Her camera app was open. A video had been recorded. Hands trembling, she pressed play. At first, the screen showed her door, just as she'd set it up. The timestamp read 2:47 a.m. Then came the knock. The faint, deliberate sound made her shiver even though she was hearing it again. But the worst part came next. The door slowly eased open on the video, not rattling, not knocking, opening. Sara dropped the phone, heart lurching. That couldn't be right. The door was still locked. She knew she hadn't opened it. On the screen, the door swung wider, revealing the dark hallway beyond. A figure stood there. Claire. Her chestnut hair hung loose, her oversized sweater draped over her thin frame. But her face was wrong. The eyes were too dark, too hollow, as though the sketches in the book had come to life. Claire stepped inside the room on the video, head tilting unnaturally to one side. Her mouth curved into a smile that was too wide, too sharp. Then she turned to the camera and whispered, "Let me in." The video cut to static. Sara's scream tore through the apartment. She backed into the corner, clawing at the wallpaper as though she could tear her way out. The door shook violently, pounding with a force that made the hinges groan. "Let me in!" The voice wasn't just outside anymore. It was inside her head, echoing against her skull, shaking her to the bone. She squeezed her eyes shut, rocking, muttering, "Not real, not real, not real." Then, silence. Her eyes flicked open. The doorknob hung still, no pounding, no voice. Cautiously, she crawled forward, clutching the phone like a weapon. She placed her ear against the wood. Nothing. Slowly, trembling, she unlocked the door and pulled it open an inch. The hallway stretched empty, shadows clinging to its corners. Claire's door was wide open again, yawning like a dark mouth. Compelled by something she couldn't explain, Sara stepped out. Her feet moved soundlessly across the carpet, her pulse roaring in her ears. She reached Claire's room. Inside, the air was freezing. The desk lamp glowed faintly, casting long shadows across the walls. The sketchbook still lay on the desk, open to the page with Sara's portrait. Only now the drawing had changed. Her eyes were gone. Two black voids stared back at her from the page. A whisper brushed her ear, hot and sharp. "Now you're mine." The lamp flickered out. When the landlord came to check the apartment a week later, after neighbors complained of strange noises and the smell of something metallic in the air, he found the unit empty. Sara's belongings were still there, clothes, books, laptop, but no sign of Sara herself. The police searched, but the case went cold quickly. No witnesses, no evidence of forced entry, just silence. The apartment was listed for rent again within a month. The ad read, "Cozy two-bedroom unit, perfect for students, affordable rent, One occupant preferred. And at 2:47 a.m., long after the new tenant moved in, a soft knock echoed down the hallway.